Okay. So now the word modern first recorded in 1585 in the sense of present or recent time. And although the word modern means up to date, it first appeared in 1585, a long time ago. And the antithesis or the opposite of this word modern is antiquity, or if you want to, you can say traditional. Now, modern era is ironically associated with the European Enlightenment. The European Enlightenment is a period in the 18th century, which started in the 18th century, and are expressed in the ideas of Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, and Hume. Now, this one is 1780, it's not 1870, it's 1780. So, the basic idea of the Enlightenment period this that the self is stable, coherent, rational. It knows the world through reason. The mode of knowing produced by the self is science. Okay, so knowledge or truth produced by the science will lead towards progress. Reason is the ultimate judge of what is true, the good and the right. Science is the paradigm for all types of knowledge, and those who produce scientific knowledge are not motivated by other concerns such as power, language, or other modes of expression used in producing or disseminating knowledge must be rational, firm, and objective connection between signifier and signified. So basically, what it says is that science will lead towards progress. Okay? It also believes that science um, is what we call that is born out of our use of reason. Our reason will give us science, and our reason is not um, what do you call that? It's not motivated or it's not caused by any other um, element in ourselves, such as desire for power and so on. Yeah? So we are not ruled. Human beings are not ruled by the desire for power. And then we have, through ourselves, through our observations and experiments, produce what is known as science. And this science is the what do you call the hallmark of progress. It signifies our progress in this world, and it's um, and we at until the enlightenment time, human beings until the enlightenment time was progressing. At least the Europeans were progressing. They thought of themselves as having progress. Therefore, you have the word enlightenment, to be enlightened, to be clear about something, to know that that thing which brings us knowledge is coming from scientific advancement and is not produced by anything other than our reason. Yeah? Now, modernity follows this Enlightenment project or era. It began in the 18th century. Modernity is fundamentally about order, about rationality and rationalization, creating order out of chaos. So it's about reason as well, rationalizing things. It is also historically connected with the creation of many new inventions. Now, these new inventions are television, telephone, and so forth. Modernity exists in a post-industrial context. It is everything that can generally be seen as modern and therefore exists as a historical period informed by those before it. It stands as an era of social relations most commonly associated with capitalism and a new global awareness. So modernity exists in the post-industrial context where we have already the things that makes us modern. We have cars, we have inventions of telephone, inventions of television. Now, this is the period of modernity when all the things are created. And It stands as an era of social relations most commonly associated with capitalism because when you have inventions, you want to sell those inventions, and there is also new global awareness because telephone, for example, allows us to speak to somebody who is further away from us, who is very far from us. So, yet from the 1870s onwards, the idea that history and civilization were inherently progressive and that progress was always a good came under increasing attack. Why? Because of the existence of Karl Marx ideas on communism. He was talking in communism. Karl Marx came up with a concept called alienation. Alienation is simply talking about how workers at factories, that were producing all these things like telephone and cars and so on, how they were alienated from their jobs and how they were alienated from each other because they're not allowed to talk to each other while working. They're alienated from their jobs because they are not allowed to make the whole thing on their own. They have to make parts of the thing. Like, for example, if they were to work on a motor car, they cannot make the whole motor car. Yeah? So you cannot say that they are motor cars makers. They don't make cars, but they are factory workers because they make one part of the car. Okay, so Karl Marx wasn't happy with this. He said that one's identity comes from one's job. So in the past, they were weavers who weaved. They were what do you call that? Workers, farmers, for example, who farmed. Yeah, so they were involved in 100% in the process of farming. But when industrialization appeared, workers weren't allowed to claim that they are the makers of this and that or that. So again, another reason was the deplorable living conditions of the working people. Very poor people were working in the factories and they were paid very little. And then also the decline of religion brought about by Charles Darwin, theory of evolution. Darwin argued that there was no God, that um, mankind, evolved from animals, evolved from monkeys, and so on. But it wasn't always a straight line of progress, according to Darwin, because he said that those who evolve into human beings can also degenerate, can also become monkeys again. If they were to live in an environment that is not suited for their health. It's not suited to their health, I'm sorry, not suited to their health. For example, if we have pollution in our environment, we cannot breathe very easily. We would breathe in a lot of smoke, a lot of carbon dioxide. So we cannot become uh, better, in a sense. We cannot maintain our health. We will degenerate. You become like maybe in a few centuries we'll become again monkeys. So this was Darwin's idea. So the concept that the Enlightenment concept that said humankind was progressing was proven to be wrong because of findings by Karl Marx and Charles Darwin. So in the 1880s, a strand of thinking began to assert that it was necessary to push aside previous norms entirely instead of merely revising past knowledge in light of contemporary techniques. So in 1880s, there was a kind of like disbelief in whatever the Enlightenment period thinkers did. Disbelief in the past. So these people were unhappy with the past because in the past the idea was that mankind was progressing, but then they discovered that they weren't progressing. They were becoming worse. They were living in deplorable conditions and so on. So they sought progress, but they couldn't find it in um, inventions. They couldn't find it in fields like science, for example. So they began to find progress in arts, in the humanities. So modernist art began to appear. They argued that in order you cannot really find progress in this world, but you can find it in one place only, and that is in paintings, in art, because in art you can convey the idea of progress through presenting and drawing in very new ways. So Avondale dates its first appearance to the years between 1885 and 86 with George Stuart's pointillism. The dots used to paint a Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. So later, and not so locally, modernism appeared in music, architecture, and literature. Avant-garde, a term used for the first time to describe a literary movement. Yeah. So the term avant-garde appeared during this time, and it described the new type of drawing and painting that appeared on the scene. So this is one. This is a monumental painting. It's very important because it shows how the painter experimented with newer forms of paintings through dots, through the use of dots. So the growing movement in art parallel developments in physics, such as Einstein's special theory of relativity. Special theory of relativity is simply saying that time, weight, length, and height are all relative. For example, time is relative because if you were to land on Mars, your one day would be longer than a day on Earth, because it takes a longer time to circulate around the sun. So it's simply saying that everything actually is relative. If a young child, for example, were to be in a room, he would think it's a small room. He would think that the room is small. But when he grows, oh, the room is big. But when he grows older, if he were in the same room, he would think that the room is small. Okay, so height, length, width, and time are all relative. So innovations in industry and increased role of the social sciences in public policy also included newer ways of looking at things. Freud's psychoanalytical theory also afforded another view about ourselves, that we have an unconscious mind. So these were the beginning of a series of intense questioning into the nature of reality. And if previous restrictions, religious and scientific authorities which had been in place around human activity were dissolving, then art too would have to radically change. So all of these findings, scientific findings, meant that the way we see the world should also change. The period of high modernism. Thus, in the first 20 years of the 20th century, many writers, thinkers, and artists broke with the traditional means of organizing literature, painting, and music. The results were abstract art, atonal music, and the streams of consciousness technique in the novel. Modernism as an artistic and cultural movement operated within the context of the rejection of realism and rejection of development of concrete values. So in the first 20 years of the 20th century, modernism appeared um, to be, at its height, at its popularity in this time. And many artists were producing works, abstract works of art, tonal music, modernist writing that included streams of consciousness. Okay? And these were rejecting the idea of realism, because realism means to depict life in a realistic way, or to draw about life in a realistic picture. So the modernists went against all of this by experimenting. And there's also rejection of the development of concrete values, because values will be rejected during this time because of God Himself was thrown away by the modernists. They didn't believe in the existence of God. Um, they thought that He was like Santa Claus. It is actually a myth. So they felt um, they felt that values were also missing. because there is no more good and bad deeds, huh? No more heaven and hell, and so on. So here, new styles were being reinvented. Um, this one is a painting by Pablo Picasso entitled "The Weeping Woman," and it's using the Cubist technique. Huh? And this technique is simply using, simply looking at a model from different angles that are cube-like angles, and then painting the model by putting together all the angles. So a picture like this is being produced. Now this is called also multiple perspective. The way we put each the same picture of the woman, the same image of the woman into one uh, portrait, is called multiple perspective. It gives you different perspective of everything. Now this one is a urinal by Marcel Duchamp, and it is where urinal is where males pass motion or urinate. Yeah. So um, this is not no this is not something. This place, is not an art, a beautiful object as such, but modernists made it beautiful. They did not want to distinguish between low art, which is art that is used to shape a ruiner, for example, and high art. So this became a museum piece. Then we have minimalist art by Piet Mondrian. So it is entitled Composition 10. Now numbers 10. So maybe there are 10 tens here. This is minimalist art. So modernism, these developments began to give a new meaning to what was termed modernism. It approved disruption, rejecting or moving beyond simple realism in literature and art, and rejecting or dramatically altering tonality in music. Modernism, while still progressive, increasingly saw traditional forms and traditional social arrangements as hindering progress, and therefore recast the artist as a revolutionary overthrowing rather than enlightening. Modernism, you know, did not want did wanted modernists wanted to get rid of traditional forms norms. So because they believe that these are the things that are hindering progress, actually, um, that are giving progress a bad name. So they recast the artist as a revolutionary who is who wants to present something extremely new to the society. So another reason for that, for modernism, was what happened during the World Wars, especially World War One. And it is found that men were ruled by their desire to dominate regardless of the cost. Man was not ruled by his reason, he was ruled by his desire, his emotion. The birth of a machine age changed the conditions of life. The second reason, machine warfare became a touchstone of the ultimate reality. The view that mankind was making slow and steady moral progress seemed ridiculous in the face of the senseless slaughter. So during the World War One, especially, many people died, and when many people died, people started to question God in the West. They started to say, why did God let all these people die? So slowly they came to reject the idea of God. So these are some of the modernist writers and painters and artists from America and um, Europe. Ezra Pound, Imagism is the new way for writing poetry that he founded. Virginia Woolf contributed to the feminist theory. I'm sorry. Bertolt Brecht came up with another concept called alienation effect. Pablo Picasso came up with Cubism, William Faulkner, and so on. So modernism is not like feminism. You don't read a work that is not modernist and you say that it's modernist. No. So modernists literary approach has to work on a work that has already been termed or been observed as being modernist. Yeah. So the first is an overemphasis. This elements of modernism is an emphasis on impressionism and subjectivity, that is on how we see rather than on what we see. A preoccupation evident in the use of of consciousness technique, um, that you can see being used in James Joyce Ulysses. Morning seeks help, a quarter after which an earthly hour, I suppose they're just getting up in China, now coming out of the epic days. So this is um, Molly's voice that we hear, and you can see that it jumps from one point to another, and there's no stop here, there's no period. So they're just getting up in China now, combing out their pictures for the day. Well, soon after, have the nuns again. Okay, so there are many things that come across the mind of the author, and it's all jotted down on a piece of paper. So it's unending. It's a stream. The second point is the movement, a movement away in novels or from apparent objectivity provided by such features as omniscient, external narration, fixed narrative point of view, and clear-cut moral position. The narrator's hands could be unreliable. There could also be many narrators, and the moral position is sometimes unclear. So the narrator of a modernist work is sometimes unreliable because they don't know everything that went on in their story, or because of other reasons. And there could also be many people narrating, many people telling the same story, yeah? As in the novels of William Faulkner. And the moral position is sometimes unclear because they refuse to, the narrators refuse to take a moral stand. They just want to observe something. A good example is Nick Carraway. Nick Carraway and The Great Gatsby. So a blurring of the distinction between genres, so that novels tend to become more lyrical and poetic, for example, and poems more documentary and prose-like. So novels, for example, Vikram Sash also wrote about um, wrote a story, A Suitable Boy, Vikram Sash, in the form of a poem. And it's a novel, but it comes in the form of a poem. So another technique in modernism is to use fragmented forms, discontinuous narratives, and random seeming collages of disparate materials. Am I to understand a fragment? Am I to understand West McNally, West Grant? However many Grant, let's give a great big hand. Am I to understand? So what is it? Am I to understand what? So it's ambiguous. It's inconclusive. What is the real meaning is inconclusive. West McNally, West Grant, it seems like these are coming from the words that people use. Or maybe there are people asking, but what's McNally, West Grant? And it comes a line in this poem. So it is very, what we call that, modernist. So there is also a tendency toward reflexivity or self-consciousness about the production of the work of art, so that each piece calls attention to its own status as a production, as something constructed. But you can see this in Six Characters in Search of an Author by Luigi Pirandello. It is an acting company prepares to rehearse the play Mixing It Up by Luigi Pirandello, and suddenly they are interrupted by the arrival of six strange people. The director is angry and demands an explanation. The father, the character, explains that they are unfinished characters in search of an author to finish their story. So is this actually a work that is very experimental, because it looks back at the form itself of place itself and shows how it works. Um, So another element is number 6, a rejection of elaborate formal aesthetics in favor of minimalist designs, and a rejection of a large part of formal aesthetic theories in favor of spontaneity and discovery in text. So this is a poem by Ezra Pound, and it's only 2 lines. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bow. Yeah. So Pound was when he wrote this, he was going to a station, a metro station, and he saw many people there. So that these people here are the people that he saw are represented in his poems. Number seven, a rejection of the distinction between high and low or popular pop culture, both in choice of materials used to produce art and in methods of displaying and distribution as something constructed. For example, the arena that we had seen, and also rap lyrics, yeah, which is pop culture, but it is studied by modernists for its um, aesthetic design. Okay. Um, so the last one is, but then, okay, that's the last one. That's the last modernism um, way. Okay, but then there was a shift from modernism to postmodernism. Okay, so another thing about modernism is that the works that are using this modernist technique, they have a more pessimistic tone. Uh, Compared to postmodernism, which is optimistic. It has an optimistic tone. It has a there are elements of fun in it. The use of satire, the use of allegory, the use of um, irony. Yeah, it's present in the postmodernist work. But for modernism, it's quite serious, um, and it has a bleak and negative what do you call that? And negative tone. Yeah? Um, okay. So one a good example that I went through with my other section was to look at the Maze Runner. The Maze Runner is a modernist work because you can see that it has a bleak tone to it. Although at the end, uh, the hero is saved, and he's brought to a place on Earth, but far away from Wicked. Um, but he has this what do you call that? This the ending also portrays all the people who had died during their struggle against Wicked and so on. But the whole movie is has an unhappy. It is largely unhappy. It's about death, people dying to save Thomas, and so on. But Thomas succeeds to live. Yeah. However, it has an open end. You don't know whether Thomas is going to survive uh, from Wicked forever. Whether we can actually manage to survive at all, we don't really know. Okay, so it's a modernist work, modernist dystopian. They call it. It's again utopian. It's not utopian. It's dystopian. It's a world where everything is going wrong. Huh? Dystopian image. So anyone wants to say anything about modernism? Wants to ask me about modernism? Anyone? If you go to museums, you can see many modernist paintings. If you the one that use collages, um, uh, that yeah, mainly the one that use collages, the one that shows modern life, and if you uses cubism, which most people do not actually use. But if you know Latif Mohidin, for example, he's modernist. He's a modernist painter. Um, so they have in painting there are many techniques. In literature, I've shown you some of the techniques, which is to write a poem that is very fragmented. We take the lines from different sources, and then we come up from uh, we come up with a poem, yeah, and then we can also write a story that has an unreliable narrator. Maybe the narrator is a cat, for example. The cat doesn't see everything in the story, um, and you get also in modernism. Um, what do we get in modernism? Um, the blurring between low and high culture, yeah, where um, things like a urinal would be an art form, considered an art form. Do you know Andy Warhol? Andy Warhol. He's the one with the who painted a can of Campbell soup. There are many Campbell soups that he painted together. You don't know Andy Warhol, and nobody knows Andy Warhol here. He's a modernist painter. You can see that. Okay, I see your. I see from Ishat Ishat's room. There is a painting there, right? Yeah. What is that? What painting is that?
It's Vincent Van Gogh's Starry Night.
Yeah, the Starry Night. Starry Night is a modernist painting. It's it relies on the concept of impressionism. Is there actually a night that looks like that? Huh? Not exactly, right? There are rolling balls of fire um, in that painting. It's meant to resemble stars, but instead of drawing about stars, uh, Van Gogh came up with this rolling balls of fire that supposedly represents the stars. So it is his what do you call that? What he sees from his inner eye. Huh? It's like also what Ezra Pound had done with his poem um, about the metro. Huh? He saw the people's faces as apparitions um, that are that are blurry on petals, like petals on a black bow. Yeah, so it's just an impression that he has of people. Yeah, that is conveyed. So that is modernist. So what is postmodernist art? It's basically, I'm talking about postmodernism because we will go next to postmodernism in our next lesson. It's basically the same thing. Modernist and postmodernist art are the same thing, but modernist art is meant to convey happiness. And no, sorry, postmodernist art will bring happiness and to the viewer or to the reader. But modernist art is it has a bleak undertone to it. It has bleak tone, especially in narratives and novels. They usually have very negative tones. And one work, The Maze Runner, fits into this. Um, and also, what can I say? There are a few others. Ulysses, and then Virginia Woolf also wrote um, novels that are very modernist, that has bleak endings. The storyline is also very bleak, about people coming back from the war, their experiences with the war, and that brought some of them to the point of killing themselves, committing suicide, and so on. So it has a very bleak tone. And postmodernist work would be different from this. It would be presenting a more funny side of life, the funny side of life. Okay, so anyone here wants to say anything? If you are doing modernism for your YouTube video, I have a few suggestions. You can just Google Meet, and then if you want to, you can draw. Okay, can be, compare your drawing. You can come up with modernist drawing. Modernist drawing is very simple also, because there was one drawing which has two different shades of chocolate. One is lighter and one is darker. And when it was first drawn, nobody thought that nobody had done it before. Nobody had drawn like this before. The two tones of chocolate. So it's sold for 70. Nowadays, it's sold for a few years ago. It sold for 73 million or something like US dollars. So it is simple. Modernist painting can be simple. It can be minimalistic. but it can fetch a high price back then because nobody has ever done it before. But nowadays, if you want to make a modernist painting, it's not a big deal, right? And you won't be paid a lot. Huh? Okay, so modernism, it's in art, for example, is something that has produced many type of experimental paintings and so on. Yeah. So anyone wants to say anything?
Doctor,
Yeah.
can we use the modernist literature characteristic to interpret the modernist painting? So,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
I understand. Okay. One thing. We can use multiple perspective. Multiple perspectives. Um, when you have in paintings like Van Gogh. I'm sorry, in paintings like the one produced by Pablo Picasso, right? I showed to you one painting um, that is basically showing how the many sides of a woman taken from different angles and then put on one canvas. Okay, that produces something very bizarre, something that is strange. In literature, we have um, William Faulkner, who is using multiple perspective also. He has all the characters talking about one single incident. Okay, so you hear the voices of different characters talking about the death of the mother in um, Fury, and no, sorry, in one of his novel. Okay, so I forgot the title, huh? But all the characters talk about the death of the mother. So this is multiple perspective also. Yeah, am I clear? You have something like fragmentation that is use of collage in art, but in a poem it can be fragments from different sources, from newspaper, from words that you hear people say often. Huh? Assalamualaikum, um, Assalamualaikum, and then maybe one line will start with Assalamualaikum, and then the next one, where is the toilet? Okay, or maybe something different from a different source. So it's combined together to produce one poem. You can do that. You can take a piece of paper, you can take out all the headlines and then put them in one poem. Yeah, that is an example of fragmentation, the use of fragmentation. So there are overlappings then.
thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Um, Anyone wants to say anything? No? Okay. Are you saying something, Ishat? No? Okay. That's fine.
I have a question, Doctor. Where when you mentioned that modernism is sort of a response to traditional way of living. So when it comes to, for example, things like colored over white or something like that, doesn't it also create a sense of political incorrectness? So it's like um, because in say politics we want more colored people, more representations from
Mhm.
other races,
Uh-huh.
but at the same time it does make a sense like just because you're white then you have less of an opportunity to succeed in that sense. Does that make sense, the question?
No, actually, I don't understand the question.
It's like it goes against the traditional norm. So let's say
Modernism.
a white person is writing something compared to a colored person. The colored person is gonna get more recognition. So it
Or
goes
because
the
she's
other way around.
um I think I'm talking about the modern world that we have today.
Yeah,
I think I still think that the white people
white people. Yeah.
are still very dominant in many fields of inquiry and paintings um, and in literature. Yeah, So you know, after all, how many people have? If you look at the Nobel prizes for literature, how many colored people have really won that prize? Um, so I think that it's still there is still a lot of um, discrimination in that sense. Maybe yeah, and we all speak in English, no? The language of literature tend to be in English. I mean, very few people, if you write in Bahasa, for example, or in Indonesian or other languages, very people are going to read the literary work. Most people will be reading novels written by English people. So I still think that it's um, that this world's unjust in that sense. Um, but in what colored people have that white people perhaps do not have is that they have their culture, and they can take pride in their culture and produce something out of that. See movies like Black Panther, for example. Yeah, so that is a very what do you call that postmodernist movie because it has it's creating something um, that goes against the tradition, goes against the tradition, but it relies on the idea of tradition as well. So this is kind of like postmodern rather than modern. So in that sense, we have colored people actually have a lot to offer. Or people that are non-Western have a lot to offer to human knowledge. Yeah? We can look at our culture and our tradition and discover something in that. We also believe in God. No? So we can offer spirituality also. White people they are looking for spirituality. There are many suicide cases and all that, right? I mean, that could be we could have answers to that, no? Yeah. And do you want? Is that okay? Okay. So anyone else has anything to ask or maybe anything to want you want to say? You can say also. Yeah. I see two different rooms here. The one by Nur Alia is quite traditional, right? And the one by Isha is quite modern. So uh, old and new combined together. I have to switch on my battery is running out. So please wait. Okay. Anything else? Anyone wants to say?
Doctor,
Yeah.
I want to ask for first, I want to ask about the language for modernism because as we learned before that, for example, like structuralism and feminism, we have something that they call the language of a structure of language. For example, for structuralism and feminism, we have like literature,
Yeah.
literature. So, is there anything like a form of language in the in modernism writings?
Yeah. Language is a very important part of modernism. They invented techniques such as streams of consciousness. It's concerned with how you tell a story, how you use language to tell a story. Um, they're interested in the sounds of language, sounds of words. You know? They pay attention to that. Uh, perhaps this has brought about the increased use of puns and things like that. You know? So they have invented new ways of writing um, that challenges the old ways. For example, rather than if you want to write a poem, you don't have to write it in stanzas. You can write it like you write a novel. So there is today an experiment with language. Yeah, and then sometimes you don't even have to um, you don't even have to try to give it a meaning. You can just write whatever you see. Um, so they play along with language uh, in that sense, and therefore I think that, that they come up with new ways of writing. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. But you said about the increased use of funds. What does it have to do with like modernism per se? I mean funds. I don't see the correlation.
Okay, between what and what? What is that you don't see the?
I mean, why is the use of puns is associated with modernist writings? You said earlier about the use of puns.
What is it? But it is it's a new way of looking at things. Maybe not puns exactly, but it can be used in a funny way. If you can, puns are already in existence during Shakespeare's time. They use puns, but more specifically, maybe streams of consciousness. Um, you know, a new way of writing poetry that is not looking like a poem. You know? You write lines in the poetry that resembles uh, prose, um, things like that. Yeah, but not no maybe not specifically puns, but puns can be because if you want to use irony, for example, you can yeah, you can use those things. You can experiment, play around. There is also have you seen paintings? No, have you seen words, poems that are written like pictures? Okay, like a poem can be like a bird, can be, or a poem can be described as. E. Cummings is famous for this. He wrote poems like the words are falling from the falling from the sky. You know, the one word um, appears, one letter appears before the other letter in an upside down manner. Not upside down, but maybe from the up until the downside, in a way, it's like it's falling down. Yeah. So this is modernist. Um,
Oh, I see. So it's more to like experimenting with language.
yeah, experimenting
Uh,
with language.
okay. Thank you, doctor. It's it answering my questions.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else was with a question? Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Nobody else. Nobody else has any question or anything to what they want to say. Okay. No. Okay. So I guess that's it for today. And then you should enjoy looking. I enjoy looking at your modernist room. So it's quite different from other people's room. Okay. So thank you so much, and see you again on Tuesday because we have to have two classes. I'm trying to finish the lessons before the last week, so that we can know. Actually, some people, when I ask them about videos, making videos of modernism of the blocks, even they don't really know the concept, they don't understand the concept. So I hope to finish all the concept before the end of the semester, so that you will know you have some time also, and submit to me the block address only. I don't need complete blocks. I just need the address because last time I had classes. Uh, Not just the last time, but for from my experience, sometimes I cannot access blogs that are just recently created. They have not been registered on a website on www. So I couldn't really see them. So whenever I have the links, I have more access. Okay, so create the blogs and give me the links on our WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I'm looking forward to our next class on postmodernism.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you,
Okay,
doctor.
Doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Bye.
Thank you,
Did
doctor.
somebody did somebody